This is the Soul-Filled Sisterhood podcast, and I'm your host, Nicole Burgess, licensed psychotherapist and soul-led leadership coach to high-achieving and highly sensitive professional women.
The information shared in this podcast is not a substitute, nor is it to convey professional, psychological, financial, or medical advice. If you could use such services, please seek them out from someone you trust. Now here is today's episode.
Episode 151.
Have you ever wondered what your inner power may look like as an animal? Well, head over to NicoleBurgessCoaching.com/quiz and you can find out. It's just a quick 2-minute quiz that I created for you. This is a topic that comes up so often in my coaching work with women where they stand in their power and feeling empowered. And so you can head over there, NicoleBurgessCoaching.com/quiz and check this quick little thing out for you. And if you want more tips and information, you can just sign up after you take the quiz.
Well, welcome, sisters. I am so excited about this next conversation. This is for all of you who are in leadership, thinking of leadership. You will want to tune into this episode. My guest today is Roberta Matchison, and she is a globally known thought leader who helps leaders achieve dramatic improvements in employee engagement, retention, productivity, and profitability. She is the CEO and founder of Matchison Consulting, where she works with Fortune 500 companies and mid-size emerging companies to create teams that achieve extraordinary results. She is known as the Talent Maximizer. She's a seasoned speaker and the author of 6 books and blogs for Fast Company, Glassdoor, Forbes, and Thrive Global. In her new book that we're going to talk about today is Can We Talk? 7 Principles for Managing Difficult Conversations at Work. This details how to prepare, start, and manage the potentially challenging exchange of words that typically occur at work, and come away with an understanding that for any conversation to take place, both parties need to be engaged. Well, Roberta, I just want to say thank you so much for being on today.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
So you have already written 6 books. What drove you to really want to write this book here? Again, it's got tons of practical information in it, but what made you want to write this one?
Well, I do a lot of executive coaching, and I noticed a pattern, and that pattern is that a lot of my clients were avoiding these difficult conversations at work. Mm-hmm. And not only were they avoiding these conversations as far as having them with their employees, but they were having some issues with their coworkers, or they might be having a big challenge with their boss. And I found that after a while, I was giving the same advice over and over again. And then the thought occurred to me, wouldn't it be great if there was a book out there that was not just for leaders, but for people who needed to tackle these difficult conversations above them as well as across the organization? And so I decided I would write it.
I love it. And you're right. It's not only for leaders. I was telling Roberta before I hit record, I said, as a licensed psychotherapist, there are so many of the topics that she covers in here about timing and curiosity and having clarity. Well, she's got, the 7 C's basically in the book, that it applies to couples counseling. It applies to anybody in relationship. It's just a really good book. And so I love that. Yeah, it's like whether you're a leader or not, this would be a handy book to have. So one thing that you even just said, and you say at the beginning of the book, that you say that we're like at this epidemic of avoiding hard conversations. Why do you think that is? Why do you think people really shy away from having these sometimes difficult conversations, but needed conversations?
Well, I think it's for 2 reasons. I think the first reason is because I don't know about you, but I don't know anyone who likes conflict.
Right.
That's number 1. And number 2, I think that they actually believe subconsciously that these issues are going to go away on their own. And so, let's just give it some time, and I'm sure it'll work itself out. And you and I both know that rarely does that ever happen. And in fact, those situations get worse.
Mm-hmm. Right. The more you avoid it, the bigger the issue becomes. And you gave so many case examples from either those that you've worked with or people who have given you some stories or your own personal experience through the workplace of the more it got avoided, then it can erode trust. It can erode how people even view you as a leader. And so, yeah, or people don't understand like what direction they're supposed to go in if there's the avoidance of having these conversations.
Well, I think if you go back to, when you were young, I mean, somewhere along the line, something changed. When you were young, you used to blurt things out, right? And then your mom or dad would go, well, you can't say that. Right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so now it's sort of ingrained, like, especially for women, we need to like be polite and nice.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we don't realize though, is by not having these conversations, we're doing a disservice to the other person because they don't know that we're upset about something,
Mm-hmm.
we're unhappy. And especially if you're the boss and your people don't know you're unhappy, my guess is they'll find that out in the end. And we also can't improve ourselves if we don't have any feedback.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really vital that we start having these conversations and keep practicing so that they're just a natural part of our day.
Well, I like that. Again, whether you're in leadership or not, having these conversations, like I tell everybody, it's like everything that we do is basically practice. So all conversations we have with somebody else is a practice in how we either assert ourselves, set boundaries, or don't. And so I like that. Yeah, the more you do these conversations, have these conversations, the better you get and the more confident you become, correct?
That's correct. And that's why, a lot of times when you read advice about certain situations, they're like, tackle the most challenging things first, right? Get that out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually take a different approach in the book. And I say, start with a conversation that's not so challenging.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's the bottom of the list as far as, oh my gosh, like I really don't want to talk about this.
Mm-hmm.
And then work your way up, because as you have these conversations, you are going to build your skills and you will get better, as long as you take some of the practices that are in this book and you apply them.
Correct. Yeah, I like that approach too. Take small baby steps that I like to tell my clients, and then you'll start to see some of the results. And you just gain momentum and confidence in yourself versus starting with the hardest thing first.
Yes, absolutely.
You also, which I love in here, is remind us, it's in the clarity chapter, how there are different social styles. And I know for me, I'm guilty of sometimes thinking people see things the way that I do, or, dislike the small talk. And so I can get right to the issue of things. And you're like, let's go back. Some people like the small talk, other people don't. And so really understanding your coworkers, your employees, of like knowing what their social style is can also be very beneficial.
Yes. And also, for those people who are listening in who have private, practices or consulting practices,
Mm-hmm.
I've found that you have to do that with your potential clients as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some people want to just jump right in, and some people, want to talk about the weather.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes that can be hard to gauge, right? Because you have your script and you're ready to go, which is why I recommend, and I provide a number of scripts, but I recommend not, being so narrow in that you're focusing on exactly what you've written down.
Yes.
And being flexible and seeing where the conversation takes you.
Yep. Absolutely. And that's the other part that, in your book. I love it because I joke around with my clients often about being comfortable in the silence. And you talk about that as well in the book, that so often people can be uncomfortable in that silence. And yet we sometimes need space, especially for us introverts. You need to give a little space for us to kind of gather our thoughts. And for the highly sensitive, they're deep thinkers and deep feelers. And so it takes a little bit for us to respond back to things. And so the more comfortable you can get with allowing space in the conversation, then it's easier for the other person to then respond or say, let me get back to you on that. It's really important versus, just going straight from your script and going, okay, let's get to the end of this. And so I can be done because I'm feeling uncomfortable.
Right, right. And you have to keep in mind that, chances are in your head, you've run through this scenario a dozen times, right?
Right.
So like, okay, like I've got a really good sense here of, what the issue is. And the other person oftentimes is hearing this for the first time.
Yes.
And so they need to just like have a moment and say, what did you just say? Like,
Yes.
so they can prepare, because what winds up happening is when you don't give them that space, they become a bobblehead and they shake their head up and down. And then you leave the conversation and you think, wow, that went really well. And they leave thinking, what the heck?
Yep.
Like, what did you just say? Like, what just went on?
Mm-hmm.
And if you think that's a productive conversation, we need to talk.
Well, exactly, because you hit it right on the head that, oh yeah, I've had this conversation so many times in my head and kind of know how it goes and I'm feeling really good. But the other person's like, if this is the first time I'm ever being talked to about, not hitting the deadlines on time or not following through on something, or you want to add something, add more responsibility, it can take them a little bit to adjust and come back with some questions if they're not certain about something.
Yes.
And you also talked about, again, part of what active listening is not making any assumptions. Like you talk about being very clear and direct in your conversation, which is assertive communication, but also not assuming the other person is understanding what you're saying or assuming they already know what is going on and why they're being basically called to the office or why you're communicating with them and wanting to have a private meeting or something like that. And so you're always wanting to get the clarity and letting them know what is going on and why they're being, or why you're in this meeting with them.
Yes. I mean, because I write about it in the book. I mean, it's happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
My boss has said, can we talk? And gosh, rarely is that like a great moment, right?
Right.
Rarely is your boss going to say, can we talk? I'd like to give you more money, or I'd like to promote you.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, okay, I'm being called to the principal's office. Here we go.
Yep. And I know for many people, that's that first thought, like you just said, like, oh, I'm being called to the principal's office. I'm in trouble. What's this about? And you may not be. You
Right.
may be getting a promotion. You may be getting something that's celebrated for something you've done. But yeah, it can often lead to like, oh my gosh, what happened? What's wrong? I don't understand. Especially if there hasn't been any communication before. And even at the beginning of the book, you share some of your personal experiences as you were in leadership about how you had, whether the timing was off or you had confronted something with one of your supervisors, and then they started to give you like the silence treatment, or you were no longer the go-to person to go to. And so some of these warning signs, like something is off, but it's not being addressed. And then you give, again, some ways to address kind of the elephant in the room so that you kind of get a better understanding of what's going on.
Yeah. And when you do that, you find 9 times out of 10, it wasn't, whatever you were thinking in your own mind, things weren't that bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, well, my boss has been ignoring me. I feel like it's only me, but no, actually, when you have a conversation with that person, you find out, gee, she's got some things going on with her family, and, she's not been fully present at work, and it's not just you. And she apologizes because she doesn't realize the impact that it's having on you. So, listen, we all bring our whole selves to work, even if we try to separate ourselves. And especially these past 18 months with COVID and everything, it's impossible to leave yourself at home, especially if you're still at home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. In another chapter, you talked about, staying curious and almost like having a childlike mindset. And because as adults, you say it so clearly in the book, we often, are told like, curiosity killed the cat, or you're kind of assuming again what other people may be thinking or doing. And you give some great questions for how to stay curious, and sometimes the questions to ask your employees or coworkers so that there's still kind of movement forward, or getting kind of to the root of whatever's going on and letting them be part of the company. And I don't care if this is a small size company or a large size company. I think it's hugely vital for people to feel like they're part of the organization.
Yes, absolutely. And we've all been in these situations, right, where somebody's doing all the talking and they don't ask us anything about ourselves. And then we walk away, we might be at a party or something, we walk away going, well, that was fun, right? And so when you're curious and you're asking questions and you're listening and you have to listen, you can learn a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So, asking questions like, well, why did you choose to approach the situation the way you did?
Mm-hmm.
Or, what did you learn from this? Or, how did you come to this conclusion? And it's so important to watch your tone.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go, how did you come to this conclusion? I mean, that's like a lot different than I'm really curious. How did you come to this conclusion?
Mm-hmm.
And you'll get so much more out of someone when you don't push them up against the wall
Mm-hmm.
and you allow them the space to explain themselves. And I will tell you this, people with strong listening skills are very rare.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
if you become one of those people, you'll be in a good place as far as, building strong relationships.
Yeah. Well, I know a lot of my listeners are highly sensitive folks, and I've got some therapists and things, so I know they've already got those listening skills, but it's also being able to assert oneself too, that sometimes they can get stuck there of not asserting themselves. But I like that. I remember being this is years ago in corporate, and we'd be sitting at, tables trying to brainstorm something for a solution for one of the software programs that we were working on. And our company itself really encouraged, innovation and giving feedback. But so often it was never implemented, or it kind of fell on deaf ears. And so people stopped really caring because nothing seemed to be really done about it, or even taken the step further, like what you're saying with the questions. Right? Like, tell me more about that, or how did you come up with that solution? I want to understand it better. And there was no like kind of drill down. And I think that to me, is like more inviting, like, well, maybe we won't use the whole idea, but we've got at least part of it, or maybe we will use the whole idea. Gets people again more invested in why they're working there and what they're doing.
Yes, yes. Otherwise, they're spending their time online looking for a new job.
Right. Right. Again, you're talking about so much of that is there's just high turnover, and there doesn't need to be.
Yes.
With one other thing I want to go back to, and I'm trying to now find it in the book. I don't know if I earmarked it or not. And I think this so applies to, hyper empathy. For my highly sensitive folks, they so much want to have harmony, be respectful of others, but it can also, prevent them from moving forward in their own leadership skills, or hold them back because they can be hyper empathetic. And you give a great example in the compassion chapter about how to be empathetic to employees, coworkers, but also not lose like accountability and working with them, like, again, holding the other person accountable for what the agreement is. Can you say just a little bit more about that? Like, is there such a thing about caring too much, as you say in the chapter?
Yes. Yes. And yes. That story was shared by a woman who I know very well, and she is a great leader.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was very surprised.
Mm-hmm.
And she just kept giving this guy, I think it was a guy.
Yes, it was.
She kept giving this guy multiple opportunities. He had just had a baby.
Mm-hmm.
His wife had just had a baby. And she had given him multiple opportunities to figure out how to manage his schedule
Mm-hmm.
while being there for his family. And, gave him the standard opportunities like paternity leave. And long story short, every time she counseled him, he made these promises and he couldn't keep them. And the impact that this was having on the team was devastating. And what was so interesting to me is that this leader didn't have any children. So it wasn't like she was being super empathetic because, oh my gosh, she's a working mom. She's got like these same challenges at home.
Mm-hmm.
And she just, to her own detriment, kept giving him all these chances until one day, I think it must have been, that 3 strikes and you're out. I think it was like 8 strikes.
Mm-hmm.
She finally saw an opportunity where she was able to move him out during a reduction, and she moved and moved him out.
Mm-hmm.
But man, the damage that must have done to her reputation, and people looking at her like, what's going on? Like, this guy's dragging us down, and what are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think she learned that very valuable lesson that sometimes you just gotta, you gotta just let it go and take action and stop the burn here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And again, it's no longer avoiding these hard conversations. And you can do it with empathy when you're chatting with people, or holding somebody accountable. Again, it's like there's the assertive communication and, going with the curiosity questions of like, what's going on? And, we agree to X, Y, and Z and help me understand. And there's ways to go about it. But like you're saying, it's like not letting this continue to get worse and worse and worse and not hold them accountable, because as a leader, you are part of the role modeling. And so your colleagues and employees.
And you have to be direct.
Right.
I mean, people have to hear those words. And if this continues, this could lead to termination.
Right.
Right. And we're so afraid to say those words, but man, that's going to give that person a jolt.
Right.
Like, whoa, this is super serious here.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
but too often I see, the people that I'm coaching, they're like, well, yeah, I kind of alluded to the fact that if this doesn't get better, they're not going to be in this role. And I'm like, really?
Well, because to me, it's like, if I'm not going to be in that role, are you going to put me in a different role? Right. But I'm still with the company. Yeah.
Am I getting promoted?
Right.
Oh, cool.
Right. Yeah.
So, I'm very much in favor of transparency, which I also write about in the book.
Yeah.
You need to be transparent, because to me, that's really being respectful.
Well, it is. As you, gain your skills, again, from this book, there's case studies, there's questions, and, just things to really reflect on too. It's like, as you really look like, what are my belief systems and what do I think some of these things mean to me, or what was role model to me? You may need to unlearn a lot of things so that you can become the leader that you're wanting to become, to help role model to your colleagues and employees of saying, I can have really good boundaries, I can be compassionate, I can be curious, and also be direct, and help the organization or my own business succeed by doing all of these things. So,
yeah, that's very true. And the problem is, for many people, they have never had a great leader.
Right.
So, you learn by observing, right? So if you have a boss that is a screamer and screams and yells at people and gets results, as you're going up the ladder, like, you become the screamer, right? And we both know how effective that is, right, in the long run. But because there are so few role models out there, you have to really do your own research, and you should do your own reading and develop your own style.
Yep.
Because, the models that worked back in the 70s.
Yeah, no.
80s, they don't work today.
No, they don't. And that's why I also encourage so much about when you're talking about, doing your own research, but also doing coaching. That's part of the services that coaching can really help you develop your skills as you're stepping more into these roles. That's the vital piece of it, right? I talk in previous episodes about personal development and how that really is self-care. It's like you're saying, it's like, if the healthy role models aren't there, and it's, written about so often, it's like, okay, well, who can help me with this? Reading is one thing, and then having somebody alongside you to help reinforce that is you move faster, and it really gets more ingrained.
Well, obviously, I can't agree with you more, but I do see that because, look, as you mentioned when we started our conversation, I've written 6 books. I've read them all. I can tell you that, it's great to have a book, and it can certainly, what I love about the books that I write is that they're really guides, and people, once they read them, they put them on the shelf. They tell me, oh my gosh, I pull that book off the shelf all the time.
Yep.
But man, it doesn't replace the human element. It doesn't replace having someone who can, like you said, a coach who can make you that much better.
Right.
And who can teach you things that you're not going to get in a book.
Right. And again, I think the power of our books, again, most of my listeners, I know they're book fanatics because I am, but it's I can go back and reference it. It's a good starting point, and they're far more reaching right? Depending on what country you're in. If I don't have that coaching available or I didn't know about this person, it just helps spread the word. Like there's other support as well. So you're not having to do it alone. And I think that's the biggest piece of it too, is knowing that there is ways to get that support you're needing as you're stepping more into these leadership type of roles, or again, being able to have hard conversations and you feel more comfortable with having hard conversations.
Well, I have a practice of not recommending anything that I've not done myself. Mm-hmm. And I have been an executive, and I was in the executive suite at age 24. Mm-hmm. So that presented a whole nother set of issues. Yeah. But I had a coach. And I had a coach and a mentor. And if I didn't have that person, I don't think I would have lasted 6 years in that job. I mean, I really don't. And so I know personally how beneficial it is to invest in yourself and to have somebody who can look at things with a fresh eye, who can provide you with that kind of guidance. And that to me is really where the growth happens.
Absolutely.
So I'm a huge proponent of coaching, and obviously I coach people as well. So
I'm curious, Roberta, for you, when you were 24, was the coaching something that you found through the company you were in and along with the mentorship, or did you need to search that out yourself? I know for so often young women, right, they're trying to who can I find as a mentor? How do I even go about this? So I'm curious, how was that process for you?
Well, first, let me say this. There, as you know, but perhaps your listeners don't, there's a big difference between a coach and a mentor.
Correct.
And in my first book, Suddenly in Charge, I write about the difference between coaching and mentoring. Okay. And if any of your listeners are interested, they can email me. I believe I have a piece I can send them on the difference because it matters. And so just briefly, a mentor is somebody who is usually perhaps in another organization or higher up in your organization, and they provide guidance, and you have to be the driving force. And there's usually no financial exchange. Okay. And a coach is somebody who helps you work on specific behavioral changes. And there is a financial exchange of resources. And so in my situation, my boss, when he promoted me to head of HR, recognized that clearly I had the traits and that I could be successful, but I didn't have the depth of experience. And so he provided me with somebody who could guide me.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah.
Well, that's because he didn't want to deal with me, right?
Well, whether he didn't want to deal with you or not, it's like he actually did. He moved in the beautiful direction because it helped you, whether he got it or he didn't. And
I know. I'm very grateful for that, but I just always, because you had to know this guy to know why that was true. But he was one of these, just the facts people, your 30-minute meeting with him was 10 minutes. So anything he could do to not have to meet with you was a benefit to him.
So not the best role model in how to actually lead people.
No, I didn't learn anything from him.
So again, the blessing in disguise by saying, I got to farm you out to a different person. You're like, thank you.
Yes, exactly.
Well, I'm curious, Roberta, I'm going to kind of flip this just a second before we share with my listeners about how they can find you and then your book and all that good stuff. What were some of the things that helped you as you were, being the executive coach and you writing these books? How have you been able to face any fears or challenges that have come up for you? Like, what have been some of the things that have helped you over the years besides coaching and a mentor? What are some other things that have helped you face those fears or worries?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I mean, as you get older, you just don't care.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not really afraid of anything as far as, yes, I'm afraid of diving in the ocean. I'm not a strong swimmer. And so, I want the boat within eyesight. Yes, that's a fear. But, when I write, honestly, I don't care what people think. Like, I write my truth.
I love that.
And I don't self-edit. And so that's why oftentimes people who read my book and then they either work with me or they know me, they're like, oh my gosh, I feel like you're on the couch reading to me.
Oh, I love that.
I just say it the way I see it. And, let's be honest. I mean, I work for myself,
Mm-hmm.
so I don't have to worry that somebody in corporate's going to read what I wrote and say, you can't say that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I speak the truth. And I think when you get to a place in your life where you're comfortable within your own skin,
Mm-hmm.
you say what you feel.
Yeah. I love
And
that.
I do apply my principles. I mean, I'm not mean-spirited.
Right. No. Absolutely. Yeah.
But I just say it like it is. And I think far too many people don't. And I
Yeah.
think people appreciate that honesty
Yeah.
and transparency.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And no, there's no indication through your book. You come off, you're all mean and nasty. It's not that. There's definitely compassion. But again, it's the assertiveness in the questions and wanting things to be direct and very clear. So there's not, again, like you said earlier, the transparency is there with what you're trying to what kind of conversation you want to have with this person, whoever it may be. So yeah, really good information.
And one of my goals when writing this book was, because I took the approach, this is not just for leaders,
Mm-hmm.
this is for anyone who has to have a difficult conversation. I really wanted to give people their power back.
Yeah.
Because I have been on the receiving end of these can we talk conversations,
Mm-hmm.
and I gave my power away.
Yeah.
And I didn't have to. And by doing that, things didn't go the way I wanted them to go.
Yep.
And so I didn't participate in the conversation.
Yeah. No.
And when you step back and do that, then your power is gone, right? And you're, like we talked about, you're that bobblehead.
Yeah.
Just going, okay, when it's not okay.
Yeah. Nope. I love that. And I say that often in various podcasts about taking your power back, and especially for women.
Yes.
I think this is, a really, really helpful book for that. Again, ladies, it's called Can We Talk? 7 Principles for Managing Difficult Conversations at Work. But personally, there's a lot of information that Roberta has in this book that you could really apply to any sort of relationship you have. That if there's some conversations that need to be had, you can totally use it with this book as well. So Roberta, on that note, share with my listeners, how can they find out more about you? And again, I'll have this all in the show notes, and it'll be all that information, and the links will be there as well.
Well, they can go to my website, Matchison, Matuson, consulting.com. They can send me an invite on LinkedIn.
Okay.
And just reference this podcast so that I'll accept that invite. They can follow me on Twitter at Matchison. And if they want to just reach out and start a conversation, they can email me at roberta@matchisonconsulting.com.
Beautiful. Well, I just really appreciate you coming on. I really, really enjoyed this book. And so I'm glad that you wrote another one to help out folks. And yeah, what you're putting out in the world is just beautiful. So thank you again.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for listening. And if you're interested to find out what your inner power is as an animal, head over to NicoleBurgessCoaching.com/quiz. Till next time.